This morning we're going to cover a more excellent way, love. And you do know that this was written, Paul put it in here, for all weddings. Right? Amen. Yeah, that's right. I mean, that was the reason this chapter was written, so I can just stop. So if all of you have been married, you know that that's what it's for. Sadly, that's not exactly what Paul wrote this for. It's a good thing to have, it's a nice thing to say, but that's not why he put it there. As we've been seeing, as we've been walking through chapter 12, now 13 and 14, remember this is one argument. This is one big discussion, chapters 12, 13, and 14. And we've already seen Paul sort of set up his argument. He's already talked about gifts, about their value, about how you have to think about them. But this morning, he finished chapter 12 and he says, but I'm going to show you a more excellent way. And this is the part where he's going to place the proper context on the use of gifts. Because chapter 14, he picks right back up with, okay, if I had this and if I did this and if these things were this way, here's what we need to be thinking about. Here's how we have to use them. Here's the way gifts should be used and thought about. Chapter 13 has some of those elements in it, but again, it places the context of gifts. All right? And I know that kind of is a little bit different, and I'm going to throw you another curveball, is the literary genre that I believe best fits this is a little bit different than you may be used to hearing, but I think it fits very, very well with how this is written. And we have good sources that would support that. So, as sort of background, and this is what I want to do, is I want to give you a little bit of background about how chapter 13 is written. Now, some people look at this and say, all right, well, this is just an ode to love, sort of a praising of love, and it is. But it's really put here to sort of soften what Paul's been saying, sort of set him up with, there's some problems here with your gifts. Now, let me go correct you. And so in the middle, I'm going to talk about love because I'm going to be loving and I need to talk about that. Don't think that quite fits well with the flow, but some people look at it that way. Or it's just, hey, this is a cool thing to be saying as gifts. Some people look at this as saying, well, Paul's using this description of love to say how useless these gifts are compared to love. So it's just, here's your gifts. Let me show you about love, and then I'm going to now tell you some more about gifts. And you really need to get the point that the gifts are meaningless compared to love. So some people look at it that way. Other people look at it as what's called deliberative rhetoric, and it's designed to lead you to a conclusion. And of course, he is making an argument, so there is some warrant for that kind of thinking, that he is using this to say, let me help you think about this so I can draw you to a conclusion. And that does have some merit to it. I think, however, this last one is probably even more effective, and this is what is called an encomium. For all of you 18th century literature people, you would have recognized that in the 17th and 18th century because it was a very commonly used word. A word that you might recognize more is the word eulogy today. And the thing about it is most people just think of eulogies as something that happens at a funeral, right? And we go, okay, it must be a funeral thing. Mm-hmm. Well, the reason that you have it at a funeral is because it is basically a praise. But a proper eulogy, and in particular this proper encomium, has a structure to it. A lot of people say, okay, I'm going to do the eulogy, so they just say, about this person or that person, whatever. But there's actually a structure to it. And here we actually have written handbook examples and written forms of this from Paul's day that give us a structure and an outline and how to write these things. And a lot of scholars have gone back and looked at chapter 13 and said, wow, this looks just like an encomium or a eulogy or whatever you want to call it. And so there is a praise nature to it, there's an argument nature to it, etc. But the way this is set up, I think fits really well with what Paul's doing and how he's using it. So I'm going to follow that as the basic outline. Now, the outline of a typical one, which is a praise to either a person or a virtue, there's 5 sections to it. And the first section is a prologue. And if you're talking about a person, then you go and talk about their birth and upbringing. So in other words, you say some introductory comment that sort of sets the stage. Then you describe the person, their upbringing. So-and-so was born here, they did this, they grew up here, they had kids, sort of a narrative of their life. Now, if it's a virtue, you don't have to have that because you're not, when it was born and how it grew up and it was a nice little virtue, that kind of a thing. And they went off to college and became more virtuous, whatever. That's not what you'd have in there. So that piece would be missing if you're talking about a virtue. Then you talk about the acts of that either person or virtue. And therefore, when you're talking about a virtue, there's going to be a personification of it. In other words, this is what this virtue looks like or behaves like, the acts of it. If it's a person, here's what they have done or accomplished. Then you have a comparison. Now, if you think about, say, in a eulogy, you can say, my father was not a wealthy man, but he did everything he could to give us, and we felt like we were the richest kids on the block. So what are you doing? You're comparing. He wasn't a rich man, but his behavior was such that we felt like we were the wealthiest kids on the block. So doing a comparison between wealthy and poor and things like that. So there's a comparison of this person, or in this case, virtue, to something. And then finally there's an epilogue, which basically says, now let me conclude and help you understand the big picture of how this person fits into world or life or whatever, or this virtue fits in. And what we're going to see as we walk through here, each of these elements, minus the upbringing and birth, are present in this section, and they're all related to the discussion of the gifts, because he actually uses these as the framework for setting it up in the prologue. And so if we look at it, and it's the top of page 2 in your notes, we're going to have the prologue, which is going to be verses 1 through 3 in chapter 13, the acts of love in verses 4 through 7, the comparison of love, and this is going to be compared to spiritual gifts, in verses 8 through 12, and then the epilogue, which is actually verse 13, and technically verse 14a, but I'm going to say 14a for next week because you could put it either direction, but it'll be a good lead-in, so I'll say that for the next lesson. So technically, the first phrase of verse 14 would actually fit into the part of the epilogue because it says pursue love. Okay? But we'll pick that up as the intro to chapter 14. So, in this narrative, though, now in the letter that Paul is using, this is a praise, right? This is, what love is and how wonderful it is and what it's compared to and all the other kinds of wonderful things as a virtue. And it's also personified. But in this narrative, as it's associated with the spiritual gifts, it's more of an indictment of their lack of love in relationship to these things. So as it's interesting, as he is praising love, he's indicting the Corinthians. And most scholars look at this and say, look, the things that he is highlighting about what love is and isn't when he goes to the Acts section of this are very likely some of the principal failures of the Corinthians. Okay? And so even though this is a pretty extensive narrative on love, it is, and because there's 15 characteristics that are associated with the acts of love. It's pretty extensive. It is mostly targeted at what they failed at. Because we're going to see this is their failure. Why is he bringing up love? Because you have exercised these gifts without love. And we're going to see how valuable that is. And the word is nothing. So that's pretty much of an indictment of how you behave in this context. That's why chapter 13 fits into the logic and the argument. And I'm going to walk through it using this Iconium eulogy format because it fits really well of what he's trying to express and so that they can understand it. So again, you may have never heard that before, but I think in the book as it sets, that's probably the best answer. Not saying that there aren't other answers that are good answers, but I think just from my study that this seems to be the best answer. All right? Okay. Let's begin verses 1 through 3, and this is the prologue. It says, "If I speak in the tongues of men and angels, and have not love, I am a noisy gong or clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and I have faith so as to remove mountains, but I have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I am delivered up my body to be burned, but I have not love, I gain nothing." All right? So these are, if you will, premise statements, right? He's setting up the context of his argument in this prologue. Now, if you notice here, he's setting up a whole series of comparisons. And he's talking about, remember we talked about that the Spirit gives gifts and services and activities. Well, if you see here, many of these things are gifts, services, and activities. Things I've done, things I'm doing. And he sets up not only with spiritual gifts, but all of the works of the Spirit. So again, it is spiritual gifts oriented, but it's even the bigger picture because that's how he set that up earlier in the letter. If you notice, he says, okay, if I speak in the tongues of men and angels, and I have not love, I'm a noisy gong and clangy cymbal. Now, we can go into all sorts of what does that mean, and is this brass, or is this a different kind of ringing device? I mean, there's all sorts of things that you can go into, all the background of this, but I'm not going to do that. But you get the point. He says, if I could speak in the tongues of men and angels, and every possible way of speaking, and I don't have love in when I'm doing it, I might as well be a clanging gong. I might as well be a cymbal. I may as well just be a loud noise that has no meaning. So whatever I have here, no matter how amazing it appears, I mean, think about it. If somebody could speak with every single language on this planet, right? I mean, isn't it impressive? You talk about some people, they know 5 languages, they know 6 languages. I barely know 1 language. And if I talk to a Brit, I don't even know that. Right? Was it Churchill's thing? It's a people separate, two nations separated by, divided by a common language? Yeah. So, but think about it. Somebody who could speak every language and angelic languages. Wouldn't that be amazing? I mean, you could walk to anybody in the world. And he says, and if I don't have love, I might as well be a clanging gong and a noisy cymbal. It means nothing. Isn't that amazing? That powerful thing. So if you notice here, Paul's not denying that these guys actually have gifts and services and doing stuff. We're going to see how this plays out here in a little bit. But he says, and if I have prophetic powers and I understand all mysteries and I have all knowledge and I have faith to remove mountains, but not love, I am nothing. He said, so all the amazing things that you can possibly do, or have, or be, or say, or know, without love, it's meaningless. Now, how many people have you met that know all sorts of stuff, can do all sorts of stuff, can say all sorts of stuff, and you realize that there is no love there? What happens? Is that profit anybody? No. And he said in Corinthians, realize that I'm not correcting you that you can't do lots of stuff. What I'm correcting you is you don't have the right heart. You don't have the right care. You don't have the right behavior, because we're going to see the acts of love that are going to follow here. And then he says in verse 3, he says, if I give away all I have, in other words, how generous you could possibly be, and the way this is worded is it's associated with I'm giving food or care to other people. And if I deliver up my body to be burned, and there's question as to whether it's burned or boast or whatever, but I don't have love, I gain nothing. So if you notice here, the words are even changed. It says, it's not even a profit to you. You are nothing and you gain nothing. It says, so you're a mess, you gain nothing, and you are nothing. You are nothing and you gain nothing. So regardless of how you look at this, well, at least it was good for me. No, it wasn't. It wasn't even good for you. Even if it wasn't good for anybody else, it didn't even profit you any. And he sets up with that prologue. Now, if he is setting up love this way, how important do you think love is? Yeah, it's very important. It's really, really, really critical. And that's why he says, I'm going to show you a more excellent way. And I'm going to set this in the context in this prologue of how important love is, regardless of how amazing everything else is. I don't care what you speak, say, know, do, act, serve, give, anything without love, it's meaningless. So there's your prologue. And so that applies beyond these gifts, of course, because again, he's showing there's more to it at the services and the ministries and things like that. But what's the question that you're going to ask, though? Well, if it's that important, what does it look like? Right? And that's why he sets this up in this format. He says, all right, if it's that important, and let me show you what it looks like so you Corinthians clearly aren't getting it, and most of us don't get it fully. Let's see what it looks like. So he continues on in verse 4 through 7. And he says, love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It's not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Okay? Really simple. But think about that for a second. Remember I've talked about things that are simple or profound? Those are simple statements, aren't they? Takes about that much room. But they're unbelievably profound when we put them into practice. Now, if you notice here, and I'm gonna give you some prelude here to this, but if you notice here, some of these things are positive things, and some of these things are negative things. Some of the things, this is what love is or does, and here is what love or does not look like. So it's not just a one-sided, well, love's this. It's love's this, and love is also not this. So you see both sides of it. And I think a lot of times when you're trying to explain something, you have to give both sides of the story. We're gonna see here when love being patient, and you go, well, gosh, I always have to be patient, so if my kid runs out in the road, I just need to patiently wait for them to figure out that they're about to die, right? No. I'm not about to be patient if my kid's running out in front of the road. I'm going to grab the kid, yell at the kid, do anything I can, right? Well, see, you weren't a very loving parent there grabbing your child. No. Okay, I think we missed the point here, right? So again, there's these positive and these negative types of things that need to be spoken to. Now, as, again, prelude to the list, let me point out a couple of things. First off, they are positive and negative. Secondly, all of these are verbs, not adjectives. Okay? What is the difference between a verb and an adjective? Okay? A verb is an action. So again, that's why this fits into the acts of love. Not the, let me describe how pretty it is, the adjective. It has a shimmering, glittering, those are adjectives. Verbs of what love is means the way Paul describes this is if you want to see what love is, it is found in action. Not in what? The favorite word of the day. Feelings. Okay, I don't feel loving. Okay, you may not feel loving, but did you act loving? There's a difference, isn't there? And Paul says, let me explain to you, Corinthians, because remember, I'm dealing with the context of how you behave. This is what love looks like in action. That's why he uses verbs. These are, it doesn't matter whether you felt like it or not. Well, how did you act? Because I always go back to the thing, well, how do I love an enemy? By feeling much better about them? Showering good, positive thoughts towards them? Going, oh, they're not so bad? You realize the word enemy means that they're like against you and they're not nice people and all that kind of stuff. So how do you love your enemy? Show it, right? Mm-hmm. So there's something that says, yeah, you're my enemy, but I still can love you because I am going to show you love. Right? And how do you win people? By feeling better about them? You win people by showing them the love of Christ. You show them that you care. You show them that you feel for them. You show them. So love is an action. Now, is there feelings in love? Yes. By loving somebody and acting in something, you are also showing compassion. I can feel compassionate for an enemy, right? I wouldn't want to be locked up in chains after a battle. I'm going to be nice to them. Compassion. You can have there's emotive compliment that comes along with it, but it's not based in emotion. It's based in action. And so he's going to say that. You need to understand that this is first off and foremost action. So when he puts it in the context of this discussion with the 1 Corinthians is, I'm going to be addressing what you guys are doing, not what you guys are feeling. I feel so wonderful about the Lord's Supper. What were their actions in the Lord's Supper? Were they loving? No. They did not show love and compassion. They didn't show wisdom. They didn't show maturity. Secondly, again, though there is a praise here, this isn't really an ode to love per se, but it's really pointing out their failings. I mentioned that, but this description says you are failing in these things. Because clearly if I have to tell you what these things are and call you out on them, this is where you're failing. And third, if you think about these as we look at them, you're going to see, and we could go through a list of scriptures, that these all are reflective of God's character, right? Haven't we talked about have the mind of Christ, be imitators of me, etc.? This is how God treats us. He's kind. He's patient. Aren't you glad? He does not keep the account of wrongs once you're saved, because it had paid for. There's an account, but he doesn't go, oh, look at how horrible you were. Wait a second. No, my son paid for that. So there's all these things that are very reflective of God. So even here he's saying, look, you need to be an imitator of Christ. You need to be an imitator of God. You need to understand how he thinks, acts, and behaves towards us. And so you can see many of these characteristics reflected elsewhere in the scriptures. So again, all these things are to say that nothing's changing. Paul's not coming up with something new out of nowhere. He's just taking and putting it in its proper context. So if you want to know what love is, let me show you what it looks like. Now, are there other things that are associated with love that probably aren't in this list? Yeah. Just like there are gifts that Paul talks about that aren't in this list, that he talks about elsewhere. There's other things. So again, this isn't, okay, if you want to know love, here's the checklist. Click, click, check, check, check. That's not a checklist. What is this if it's not a checklist? Because too many people go, well, I'm this, and oh, I'm that. Well, I need to work on this. Which is okay to examine yourself in those areas. But what is this really trying to get at? A lifestyle? Yeah. There's a heart and there's a life, because these are all present tense verbs. In other words, this is your nominal behavior in love. Is it your perfect behavior? No. But is it your normal behavior? Not, well, gosh, I really was loving today. What about the last 6 months? Not so much. That's not nominal behavior. Your nominal behavior is not so much. I see too many people, because we have very short memory spans, think, oh, well, they were really loving yesterday. Oh, I must be better now. They've changed. Really? I want to see months and years of nominal behavior to say, you've changed. It's just like a kid. I trust you. They wreck your car. You throw them the keys the next day, right? No. You let them earn so to show that their nominal behavior is being a safe driver, right? Not, well, you drove good today, so here. Love is a nominal behavior. And that does not mean it is a perfect behavior, though, right? Normal does not mean perfect. Because if it had to be perfect, we're in deep trouble, aren't we? So, now, I don't have time to go through all the gory details of every single one of these things on each and every single characteristic of love. But I'm going to go through them and sort of get a feel and a flavor and a sense for this. So when he starts off, he says, love is patient and kind. Well, patient is critical to being loving, right? What does love being patient tell you about how they need to interact and, of course, how we should interact? What does patience look like or act like?
When somebody's not as nice to you as you think they should be, you won't get frustrated with them.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about the not acting rude or insisting on one way, but yeah, patience is something that you have to say, okay, well, it didn't work out this time. Well, but I give him more chance. They didn't quite get it this time. I'm going to help them understand. Patience is something that requires time. And sometimes it requires ignoring things. Sometimes it requires giving a little subtle encouragement. Patience is saying, I can wait while you grow and learn. I can wait while you develop. I can wait because I don't have to have it now my way. And that's the reason I use the car example. Now my way, stop, kid. Because you're going to die if you take 2 more steps. Okay? There's times where you don't want to be patient. But when you're training a kid, don't you have to be patient? Doesn't it take time? You don't expect them to get it the first time? I mean, you want them to, but it ain't going to happen. What about ourselves? What about our lives? What about the way we work? We have to be patient. And so he says, Corinthians, if you want to show what love looks like, you need to learn patience. You need to practice patience. Your actions need to be patient. And then he says, and it's also kind. Okay, so you can be patient and obnoxious, or you can be patient and kind. Right? You've seen people who are, I'm patiently waiting for you now. You know? Okay, that's not really kind, is it? So again, they kind of go hand in hand. I think that's why he put them together, but there's a kindness to it. There's a grace to it. And he says, if you're going to see people that are going to screw up, and you will, you need to have the time to think about it, to help them, to encourage them, and you need to be kind in when you do it. Now, are there times where you yell, stop, kid, go out in the road? Yes. And it may not sound kind. Oh, would you please, darling, not run out in front of the semi? You know, I'm sorry. That's not going to get their attention. See the difference? What is the attitude here? I love you enough to yell at you. Sometimes you got to do that. Most of the time, though, you're not. You're going to be kind. You're going to be gracious. You're going to be patient. Again, see, the reason I want to make sure everybody doesn't go running off. Well, he said I should have to be really kind and never say anything. You know. Again, this is called wisdom too, right? You got to use those words involved in this. There's a wise way of being patient and kind. And it's interesting. I thought this was really fascinating. If many of you who have studied church history know the gentleman named Tertullian. And Tertullian was one of the 2nd century church fathers. And he wrote that in one of his apologies that the kindness of Christians was so shocking to the pagan world that Christians were called Christiani with an E, which means made up of mildness or kindness, rather than Christiani. Christiani versus Christiani, because they were so shockingly caring and mild and gentle versus the obnoxiousness that everybody was used to seeing. They actually relabeled them as the kind and mild and gentle ones. Isn't it interesting? Yeah. Isn't that fascinating? So you're sitting here going, this was a characteristic that should be evident, and it was so evident in the early Christian church that they were referred to that way. It's kind of interesting. So I thought that was just a little historic note. It was kind of cool. Now, Paul now goes on and he says, okay, let me explain to you what love isn't. I've given you 2 what is. Now I'm going to give you a big, long list of what love isn't. Which usually, that's the reason a lot of scholars go, clearly this must be what these guys are looking like. They're not looking like this, but they are looking like that. So let me help them understand what love is not. So he says it's not jealous or envious. Now, the word that's used there can be either a positive or negative term, and it relates to something of having an intense interest in something, right? I am jealous for that. In other words, I have an intense interest. And you can be jealous for good works. Hey, is that bad? No. Or you can be jealous because somebody has something you don't have. Not so good, right? I want that. So the word itself, and in this context, of course, is clearly saying, yeah, you're not edifying. There's something about that gift that person has, something about they have that I want, or I want this to be changed, I want that to be different, or whatever. You're envious, you're jealous. You are not edifying this community in your behavior. It's not boastful. And this word points back to a lack of a sense of proportion to the point of wounding others. Now, the reason I'm phrasing it that way, you can say something. Now, remember last week when I talked about Luther? Or was it last week or week before? One of those weeks that Luther talked about, you don't say that I don't have something because that's false humility. Right? But what do you say? I have it because God has given it to me and graced me with it, and I'm going to use it. See, now that's not boastful, is it? Though some people say, oh, you said you have something. Oh, it's boastful. No, it's not boastful. If it's, hey, I got it, now you're boasting. It's about me. Versus, if you're a good piano player, you're a good piano player. God given you the gift to play piano. You've worked hard at it. You're a good piano player. Now say, I'm a good piano player. It's about me, and you guys are nothing. Okay, now we got a problem, right? That's boasting. So see, that's that sense of disproportion. In our society, it's either all or nothing. And this word is, there's a sense of disproportion. So it's okay to say I can play piano. And then go use your gift. Not saying, hey, I am the piano player, and nobody else can be anything but me. Okay, now you got boastful, you got enviness, you got jealousy, you got all sorts of problems. So, hey, if you can play the piano, go play the piano. Praise God. Don't go, oh, I can't play. Well, where's the last time you played? Oh, Carnegie Hall, but, I'm kind of, that's just silly. That's ridiculous. And so, don't be boastful, guys. It's okay to say, yes, I have that gift, or yes, I have that ability, but don't have a disproportionate so that you're now wounding other people. You can be intelligent and wound other people. You can be intelligent and help other people. Right? So, where's the disproportion? When you're so smart you crush folks? Versus, hey, I can use my wisdom and my knowledge to encourage and help and guide and lead. Right? You can be an obnoxious teacher. Or you can be a gracious one. Doesn't mean you can't teach. Doesn't mean you don't know your stuff. But how are you doing it? Disproportionate to wound or proportionate to edify?
I've always thought about it this way. If it's all about me, then like you were saying, if it's all about me, then there's a huge challenge. If it's, I have this gift or I'm doing this thing because of the Lord, then that's what it is.
Yeah. What are we using it for? Is it for me or is it for others? That's why when we go back to the whole thing, what were the gifts for? To edify the community. To encourage. All right. Not arrogant or puffed up. This clearly must have been a problem there because 6 of the 7 times this word is used in the New Testament, it's in this letter. So if you're worrying about arrogant and puffed up, here it is. 6 of the 7 times the word used is in this letter, which is kind of interesting.
Isn't arrogant the same thing as boastful, or is it?
You can be arrogant and not boastful. But usually if you're boastful, usually some arrogance comes along with it. You don't have to say anything to be arrogant. And so clearly this is in direct opposition of edification. Being arrogant about something, like I'm never wrong. That's arrogance. I'm usually right is not arrogance.
Boastful, how you think about yourself, and arrogance, how you act about yourself.
Well, both of these are going to be actions. They're both actions. You're being boastful. See, it goes back to, can you be good at something? Yes. Now, can you be arrogant about it? I'm the best out there than anybody else. Yeah, now you got a problem. Even if you don't say it,
So it's like
you act it.
You don't have to say it.
You don't have to say it. Everybody knows that you're arrogant.
They know it.
Yeah, it's an attitude and a behavior. And I mean, you can tell somebody who's arrogant, just watch their body language. If you don't know anything else, just look at them and go, you are arrogant. And of course, oh, I'll prove it. Okay, well, I just did. By your response. You would probably tell by voice inflection or how they walked.
That's right.
You can tell an arrogant person by how they walk. Right?
Or they slow themselves down like, you're stupid, let me explain it
Yeah.
at a lower level.
Yeah, so you can tell. And some people sound arrogant even though they're not intending to be. That's the socially dysfunctional of us. I didn't mean to say it that way, but, you know.
So I'm not arrogant, I'm dysfunctional?
You're just dysfunctional, yeah. It says, love's not rude and does not act indecently. And this word actually carries a sexual overtone, which could be implying, remember the person who was with the father's, wife and all that kind of stuff. He could be implying this. But there's ways to act indecently or rudely that aren't sexual, right? He talks about coarse gesturing and crude speech and things like that. He says, love doesn't behave that way. It does not insist on its own way. Now, this is one of those ones that people go, well, am I insisting on my own way, or I'm just standing my ground, or I'm standing for the truth? It's a tricky one, isn't it? When people stand, I got to have my way, don't you know it? Versus, I think I'm right, let's talk about it. There's nothing wrong with, here is my conviction, here's what I've studied. I mean, stuff I've taught, some of you might go, I don't agree with you. Okay. But, boy, it's going to be my way or the highway. That's a different thing. Let's talk about it if you don't agree with it. That's fine. You may not like this outline. It's all right. There's 5 other ones you could have. And I've looked at all of them, So I've chosen to pick this one. There's a million ways you can do these things. So the question is it my way or the highway? Well, that's you're insisting on your own way. Versus I want a dialogue. I want to discuss. You still may come down. This is the way I feel. This is the best way to do it. So you do it that way. It's okay. But insisting on my way, there's where you are no longer acting in love. The only way is my way. What does that already say?
Being everything that they just talked about.
How edifying is that to a community? It isn't. You can be a strong leader. You can be right a lot of the time. You can have good guidance. But if you believe you're always right and your way is the only way, you're not being very loving towards brothers and sisters. Have you ever thought about this? That sometimes permitting somebody else to do it their way will teach them something.
Even though you don't.
Anybody use that in parenting? Okay, go right ahead. You're not going to fall down that hill. Go. Yeah, all right. Okay, they're not going to break their neck, I don't think. Okay, where's the 911? You got to let people learn. How do they learn? They learn by doing. I can talk to you all day about love, but how do we learn love? Doing it. All right? So sometimes insisting on your own way is a very poor way of helping people understand you are right. Does that make, no, sorry. But no, that's arrogant. Right? You can go and say, look, let me help you understand this. This is the situation. All right, this is the way I would do it. But here, in love, let me help you learn. And you might go, they were right. Maybe I need to readjust my thinking. So, again, sometimes insistence of your own way isn't actually very helpful. It's not irritable, resentful, or provoked. In other words, this is grudge holding. Now, we're going to talk about that love doesn't keep record of wrongs, but we're going to see here in a second how that all fits. But basically, if you realize that holding grudges creates problems, usually you're going to get a blow up in it. Not keeping a record of wrongs. Now, does this mean that you forget everything that happened? I now have a memory wipe. It never occurred. No. But what this is implying is I'm keeping the record of the wrongs so that I can go fix it. Get payback.
In other words, like revenge kind of thing?
Yeah, like revenge. I will get you and fix you for that. So I'm keeping the record. Tick, 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 tick. You'll pay for that eventually. So it's not saying that I've ignored things, because love doesn't rejoice in evil. So it recognizes evil. It understands evil. It's not going to pay any attention. It's not like it ignores it. But it ignores it to the point of saying, I will let the Lord deal with this. Right? Haven't there been times in your life that you say, I can get you, and here's the perfect time? I could nail you right now. But love says, no, I'm not going to keep that as a wrong. I'm going to let the Lord deal with it. I'm not going to go get my, if you will, pound of flesh. So when these people, they've been wronged, he says, don't keep that record, because that's not your job. It doesn't mean forget it. It means don't keep a record of it. There's a difference between those two things. Because one is unto a purpose of getting mine, and the other one is, okay, every time I've let them go and ride the car after midnight when they go to a party, they wreck it. Maybe we should not do this. It's using your brain. Right? So these are not Pollyanna characteristics, guys. And it doesn't keep the record, and it does not rejoice over wrongs or injustice. All right? So that unjust outcome of your taking the person to court and all that he's talked about, maybe that's what's being implied here. Why can't you rejoice in justice, not injustice? It does, however, rejoice with the truth. Oh, and this one's a hard one. I could spend a whole lesson on this one. But think about this. When Paul says it doesn't rejoice over wrongs or injustice, but it does rejoice together with the truth. So when truth comes to you or to me, and we don't like it, because it's truth, and we might be guilty, he says, I rejoice with the truth. Now, if it's the truth, oh yes, that's truth, I've got you fixed, we can rejoice with that all day long, right? We've got truth. But when it comes to us, can we take it? Can we take with the truth and say, you're right, I was wrong? Or, wow, that's something I hadn't thought of. Maybe I need to ponder that a little bit. And then, when you learn through the truth, can you rejoice in it? Now, that is a hard one for us in our society today, because we're all victims, right? It's all somebody else's fault, right? Nothing can ever bad happen to me. I need my participation ribbon. Or whatever else.
So is there a difference between rejoicing and being happy about it?
Well, rejoicing with the truth and being happy about the truth is, in other words, I want the truth to affect me in a positive way, so I can be excited about that, even if it's something I don't want, because it reveals something about me that I wasn't so pleased to have revealed.
It's helping me with my sanctification.
Yeah, it's helping with my sanctification. If you don't look at it that way, when you're wrong and somebody points it out, you should say, oh, sorry. First, repent for what you did or how you acted. But you should go, thank you. That's hard. That is really, really, really hard. But that's what love looks like and acts like. How many times has somebody brought something to you in truth, in love? Again, there are people who bring it with a club. That's not what you're supposed to do. And you realize, wow, I was wrong there. Even if I was only 1% wrong, I still was wrong. The other 99.9%, I was still right. And maybe they think I'm 99% wrong, but there is truth there that I need to take. And I need to say thank you. You helped me see something that I didn't see. Sometimes when you pray for God, show me something, He shows you in the way you don't want. Like bringing truth. And you don't rejoice in it. He says that's what love looks like. And the last part is, of course, it talks about love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And this is really a summation. Now, here's where you have to be careful, and forgive me, I'm much more, I'll call myself a pragmatist realist as opposed to somebody who just loves beautiful language. Because isn't hopes all things, believes all things, bears all things, doesn't it sound lovely? It is. And it's a wonderful way of saying it. But I looked at it in this way, and I read some other commentators that I thought brought some very interesting perspectives. That this is the summation of love, and I called it in the relentless qualities of bearing, believing, hoping, and enduring. In the context when it says all things, in other words, wherever I am, no matter what situation I am relentlessly bearing, believing, hoping, enduring. And one translator wrote it this way, and I thought this was kind of, some people might consider it more negative. I consider it more meaty. Love never tires of support. Love never loses faith. Love never exhausts hope. Never gives up. So that takes away that Pollyanna, I just believe everything. That's not what he's saying. That's gullible. I believe everything. Yeah, no. What are you believing in? I am relentlessly going to hold to God's promises. I'm going to relentlessly bear up under those difficult situations. I'm going to just relentlessly hold on because love never gives up. That's what I'm going to do in my life. It's this diligence. It's this continuing thing. And when I have wrongs against me and I want to keep record of them, I am going to relentlessly try to stay away from that. I am going to just continue in that hope. And that is so hard. So where are you going to get it from? Source, the power and the Spirit of God. Which is what Paul has been from the beginning saying, here's what I've been bringing to you. This is what you have, Corinthians, but you're not living like it. You are off on your own, looking as your own, thinking it's about you, and you've missed the point. All right. I'm going to give you a brief summary of this comparison, or I can take a few extra minutes after class, because we're technically done. I apologize. There's just so much to this, and you now can imagine how hard it is to throw this stuff out. But look at the comparison. He says love never ends. For as prophecy, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. For when I was a child, I spoke as a child, I thought as a child, I reasoned as a child. But when I became a man, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been known fully, or as I am known fully. So if you really think about the comparison, he is basically putting the Corinthians in the proper perspective of how these gifts, services, and ministries should be understood in light of, if you will, eternity. Or in the particular case, the second coming. And when love never fails, or love never ends, or love never stops. In other words, this is that relentlessness. It doesn't stop. It's a continuing thing, and it's going to be there for eternity, right? Doesn't John say God is love? You know, he loved us, you know. We love him because he first loved us, etc., all these other things. Love never ends. It never fails. It never falls. He says, but, since that doesn't go anywhere, but all these other things, prophecy and other gifts and speaking and all the other things, they are, one, partial, incomplete, imperfect, and they will end. Now, again, I'm not going to get into a big debate over secessionists and non-secessionists and all that stuff. Yeah, that's a whole other class.
Darn.
I know, that's a whole other class. I'll go someplace where I can run away fast. No. But if you notice here, he says, for all of these things, they're going to pass away because they're only partial. And then when he goes and he says, and when I was a child, I spoke as a child, thought as a child, reasoned as a child. In other words, okay, that's partial. That's incomplete. When I became a man, I put away those things. Well, when the perfect comes, I'm going to put away those things. They're not needed, right? You don't need to be childish. You need to think maturely. And when it comes, that's what it's going to be like, giving up childish things. And we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. And there's a lot that can go into this, but there's varying meanings, and it's in your notes, but there's varying meanings of how this can be understood. But since he says that we see in a mirror dimly, that's actually the Greek equivalent of the modern English word of enigma. It's sometimes translated as in a riddle. And this does match to how the Old Testament Septuagint translation of Numbers 12, 6 through 8. Remember Moses, Miriam and Aaron were being chided by God. Said, you know, your prophets see in visions and they see in dreams, so they only see in part. But Moses, who is over all my people, he sees me face to face. So that word which is associated with that the prophets only see bits and pieces in the Septuagint is the same word Paul's using here. He says, I see in a mirror. So in other words, I see in a mirror, it's reflective. So I'm not really seeing the real thing. I'm seeing an image of the real thing. And what I'm seeing is, if you will, still a mystery as to what the fullness looks like. So he's using the analogy of a mirror. It would be like today. I can see your picture. Is that not a representation of you? Doesn't it say something about you? But is that you? No. So that's why he says it's like seeing in a mirror. There's this inner meaning between the cross and eternity. There's this inner meaning thing of all these gifts and all this knowledge and all this wisdom, and it's still just in part. It's still not full. But when the perfect comes, we will know as we are known. God knows us fully, and we will get to know God. We will see face to face like Moses. We will get to have that, and that's an exciting thing to think about. And he says, this is how I want you to realize that these gifts, put them in their proper perspective and put them in their proper place. And there's this guy named Holiday who, and I've got the paragraph in here, I'm going to read it for you real quick. He says, the Corinthians have erred because they have reversed this fundamental eschatological truth. For them, essential partial gifts possess finality. Essential partial gifts possess finality. And these gifts are worth making the ultimate claims about, when in fact, agape, or love alone, has seen to possess such finality. In this time, the only thing that's really, really true that's continuing on is love, not these gifts. Love's going to continue. These gifts are not. It alone reveals the interior of the Christ event that turned the ages. The quintessential eschatological reality then is love. And it is only such reality we have that has invaded the now in the absolute sense. For this reason, it alone can be earmarked as the existence in Christ. In other words, what he's saying, and we're going to see chapter 15, what are they going to worry about? Oh, has the resurrection come? Is Christ returned? He's going to go teach them on that, because what they've done is they've turned, it's all about now, and these gifts are now, and it's all final now, and we're going to stand on it now. And he's saying, no, it's about love. Love is what is going to continue on. What we have now is partial. What we're going to have then is full. What we have now is incomplete, an enigma. Does it mean that don't know something? No, we know a lot. But it's still not complete. And I'm excited about that. Because we get to know more about God. So all those questions that you had, God, why did you do it that way? You get to know. Maybe. Hopefully. Because we ask all these questions. How come it's that way? Why is it that way? Well, because God did it that way. And we're going to see in His goodness, in His purpose, in His plan, we will get to know as we are known. How well does God know you now? Way too well, right? Way too well for me to feel comfortable. I know myself well enough not to feel comfortable. But we get to see that. And He says that's why what we have now is partial. These gifts are partial. Don't put ultimate value on them. Even the knowledge we have. This lesson is partial. And so in the end, He says, now, faith, hope, and love abide these three. But the greatest of these is love. Now, I have two different ways you can look at it. You can look at it temporally, or you can look at it logically. And I'll let you read the notes and then ask me questions next week about that. But what he really is doing is he's saying, like, I want you to understand that all these things, faith is what you're founded on, hope is what you're looking for, and love is how you're living in. And you're going to live in it from now to eternity. The greatest thing you guys need is love. You have faith, you believe, you have hope, you're looking forward, but you don't have love. This is the greatest thing. Now and forever, you need it. And if you Corinthians are now going to pick up and use your gifts and services and abilities that the God has given you through His Spirit properly, you need love. You got to have it. Without it, everything else is nothing, which is what his prologue said. So the greatest thing you need to do is love. And verse 14, part 1 says, pursue love. That's where we're going to pick up next time. So again, I apologize for a short shift on this. There's so much more here that we can talk about. And if you have questions on other subjects, we can do that. But if we're going to honor Christ in our living, if we're going to honor Him in the use of our gifts, if we're going to behave in a way that is edifying to the body, it has to be done in love, not just greatness. Greatness gets you nowhere. Burn your body, give your stuff, have all knowledge, have all mystery. Without love, it is nothing. And unfortunately, we because people play lovey-dovey stuff, they run off emotionally. We then go, oh, well, this love stuff's all sappy. It's like, no, it's not. It's action. And that's what we have to remember.